The 2023-24 season is finally over for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and we get to do what we always do, which is talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this entire season.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I'm back, finally. I am not suffering from jet lag or allergies. I am suffering from what do I do now? Why do I have so much free time? I've made a lot of jokes about how I'm so ready for the season to be over. I'm tired of watching all of this bad, terrible, no good, very bad hockey. But now I'm like, oh, okay, well, the Blue Jackets aren't playing hockey anymore. What do I do now? And the answer, I guess, is have a drink, make some content. So we're going to do some bonus weekend episodes. I want to talk in more detail about Gavin Brindley's debut specifically. I've got a Monsters Monday coming later on. A friend of the show, Dino Heinheimer, who is in the chat right now, is going to be coming on to talk about the Monsters and their playoff push, because the Blue Jackets season is over, but the Cleveland Monsters season is really just getting started. So that's all kind of coming up. But I thought right now we would kind of do a little, not a eulogy necessarily, but I just wanted to kind of look at the broad strokes of the season, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I really didn't like, and maybe take a look towards the future. Talk a little bit about like what's going to happen on this show as the off season marches on, because it's a minute until we get some meaningful hockey again for the Blue Jackets, and hopefully this season, or the upcoming season, we get to watch some meaningful hockey, and the season doesn't tank itself by like mid-November. So let's start off with, I was going to start off with the good, but actually I want to start off with a quick overview of the Blue Jackets season, which is that the Blue Jackets finished dead last in their division, dead last in the East, fourth last in the entire league. They had a record of 27, 43, 12 for 66 points. That's a points percentage of .402. And just to kind of put that in perspective, last season, when the Blue Jackets were expected to be bad, they had a record of 25, 48, and 9, 59 points for a 360 points percentage. So, like, what was that? An extra 7 points in the standings, considering, an extra 7 points in the standings. Not as big of a jump as I was hoping. In terms of individual players, Johnny Gaudreau will be, or he is, finishing the season with the leading scorer of the Blue Jackets this season, with, I believe, Zach Werenski in second place. I'm just going to pull up the stats in total. Johnny Gaudreau finishes with 60 points over 81 games. Werenski has 57 in 70. So that's one of my good things, actually, is we're going to talk a little bit about Zach Werenski in a minute here, because he did tie the single-season record for most points by a Blue Jackets defenseman, which was set by Seth Jones a couple of years ago. Had a 4-point night in Game 82 to tie that record. So I guessed he was going to break it, but I'm still gonna enjoy Zach Werenski having a very strong end to the season. And once again, I've said this, a bunch of times over the last kind of couple of months, like, this team, I feel like, did not realize how much they missed Zach Werenski last season until he came back this season, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what kind of defenseman he is. Like, he can just kind of carry the team's offense. Sometimes, if no one else is doing anything, then usually Zach Werenski is doing something, which is really fun. In terms of goals, leading goal scorer Kolmachenko finishes with 23 goals, 42 points, which is I believe almost a 20-point jump off of last year, because he went from, I believe he had 21 goals last year. He's gone up to 23 goals this year, and he's gone from 4 assists to 19 assists. So, like, literally almost a 500% increase in his assists this season, which is very fun. Dmitry Vronkov will finish as the team's leading rookie with 34 points in 75 games, which I'm fairly impressed with, honestly. I would have liked to see him reach for 20 goals. He fell short at 18, but considering he was not the rookie that I was expecting to have that kind of season, I feel pretty good about that. Adam Fantilli finished with 27 points over 49 games. Obviously, he missed the last 33 games of the season due to that calf laceration, and I'm not surprised that he didn't come back, and I'm not necessarily upset that he didn't come back. But I do think it would have been a much more fun season, I think, had Fantilli been there for a lot of it, because there was a lot of times where I was watching this team and I was like, man, nothing excites me about this team. And that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. Like, I want to talk about, first of all, let's stop rambling. We'll reset. I want to talk about the good. Talked a little bit about Zach Werenski. I want to talk about the goaltending, which was much, much more consistent than last season. If I can pull up the goalie stats for just the Blue Jackets, not everyone in the league. Daniil Tarasov played 24 games, started 23 of them, finished with a 908 save percentage. Jet Greaves, fantastic. A 908 save percentage for him as well. Elvis Merzlikins finished with an 897 save percentage, but considering last year's save percentage, which was an 876, Elvis improved. I think suffered drastically because of the really poor team defense in front of him. Daniil Tarasov had an 892 last season, so big jump for him. And like, we'll talk a little bit more kind of as the season goes on about like who I'm excited about for next season. But Daniil Tarasov for me is one of those guys where I'm like, man, what can he do? Like, what's his ceiling? Where can he go? How high can he jump? And, you know, dude's 6'6". He can jump pretty high, I think. But what I wanted from the goaltending this season was more consistency, and I didn't necessarily get as much consistency as I wanted, but the goaltending was much, much better. In the Blue Jackets were not the worst team in the league for goaltending. Elvis Merzlikins was not literally the worst goaltender in the league. So, like, I'll take it. You know, goaltending took a big step forward. I think Daniil Tarasov showed people what he's capable of. I'm really excited for him next season. Elvis is going to be a question that we have to get into kind of as the offseason goes on. It's a big contract to move. I've seen a couple of someone on one of my everydayers, actually. Peter, I think, suggested a 1-for-1 trade, Darcy Kemper for Elvis. I kind of jokingly suggested an Elvis Merzlikins for Tristan Jarry 1-for-1 trade last night. I don't think necessarily either of those things are good for the Blue Jackets, but they are definitely options. Both cases of guys with long contracts who don't seem to have the faith of the front office, and could probably benefit from a new change of scenery. What's going to happen is Elvis is going to get traded to Pittsburgh and then immediately become a Vezina level goaltender, and we're just going to have to deal with that. Like, I'm telling you now, so when it happens, you can't say that you weren't warned. In terms of other good things, Pascal Vincent has had a lot of justified criticism this season about a bunch of things. About things like his coaching decisions, his lineup decisions, his ice time decisions, all of these things. I'm gonna just pull up the ice time for the Blue Jackets this season on average, because I think there's gonna be some surprises in there. You know, You've got Boone Jenner playing an average of over 20 minutes a night. Johnny Gaudreau is up there as well. And then you look at like someone like, for example, Kirill Marchenko averaged 16.25 a game, which for a guy that's leading your team in goals doesn't quite seem high enough. You've got a guy like Cole Sillinger who took, I thought, huge steps this season. New career high in points, a new career high, not quite a new career high in goals, but a new career high in assists, I believe. Had 32 points to beat his 31 points from his rookie season, 1607. Like, again, more ice time, especially if you're gonna what I saw from Cole Sillinger this kind of upcoming or this season was like the last month or so, obviously with Bujana being out. He got the big boy matchups, you know. He got the Crosby matchup. He got the Matt Barzal matchup against the Islanders. He got the McKinnon matchup against the Avalanche. He got, I believe, the Eichel matchup against Vegas. Like, he got the McDavid matchup against Edmonton, you know. So I would have thought, I think probably what this is a testament to how low his ice time was at the start of the season, because he was getting a lot of ice time later on in the season. In terms of other names, like, you look at guys like Voronkov, averaging 13.5 minutes as your best rookie. Kent Johnson, arguably one of the most exciting and dynamic players on the team, 13.33. Only played 42 games, got sent down to Cleveland for a bunch of those, tore it up, came back, ended up missing, I think, the last month or so of the season with that shoulder injury. So I'm looking for him to have a big bounce back season. I don't know what it is about Blue Jackets rookies, and like the sophomore slump is a thing, but first Sillinger and now Johnson, and I do wonder how much of it is team based as opposed to them based. So Ken Johnson is going to be a player that I'm really interested to see next season. But like, Igor Chinikov had kind of a coming out party this season. I think Alexander Texier was better than a lot of people expected him to be. I've already mentioned Cole Sillinger. I thought Jake Bean was very good this season. Alex Nylander is not really one of the young guns anymore, because I believe he was in the same draft as... I believe he was the draft after the Werenski draft. I could be wrong about that. So he's not necessarily a kid anymore, but I thought he was a real breath of fresh air. 15 points in 23 games since the trade, 11 goals. Emil Bemstrom had 3 goals and I think 1 assist for Pittsburgh down the stretch. So, like, we don't get the 3rd round pick, but I still feel pretty confident in saying we won that trade. So, like, there's a lot of good from this season, and a lot of it is, I think, potential based as opposed to actual evidence based. But like, you look at the strides that some of the younger players made this season, and I don't know if it's because of Vincent. I don't know if it's in spite of Vincent. I don't know what we'll have next season, but I see guys like Cole Sillinger perform the way that he did the last kind of month or so of the season. I see Adam Fantilli play the way that he did until he got hurt. I see Jake Bean come into his own. I see Igor Chinikov come into his own. I see Texier come back after a year away, or almost 2 seasons away, actually. You know, he's a guy that I'm going to be really interested to watch next season. Can he kick it up a notch? Can he be that middle six guy that I think a lot of fans are hoping he can be? So, like, there is the season itself was bad, but there are a lot of good points to the season. That being said, we have to talk about the bad now, because there's a lot more of it than the good. So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we'll talk about the bad things from this season as a whole here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about Monopoly Go, because we've all been there, either as a player or a fan. You know, it's the start of the 3rd period. The scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling kind of low. You're not sure you or your team can pull out a win. And that's when you dig deep, lift your heads up, and say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game. I'm going to pull off some bank heists. I'm going to take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but it's on your phone anytime. They've got tons of new twists, including leaderboards. You can play your progress to your buddies. You can play on, they've got hundreds of different ever-changing Monopoly boards. You can make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. charge other players rent for your iconic properties, and you can even work with your friends to crack open chests, and there are special tournaments to get extra rewards and climb that leaderboard. I love Monopoly Go. I'm super excited that they're sponsoring the show because I've been playing it for a few months now and I cannot put it down. It is my go-to, I'm watching TV and need something to do with my hands game. I put Monopoly Go on and I just go to town. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about the bad of the season, and we'll try not to go too long, but I suspect we might just do that. So I mean, where do we start? This season was a disappointment almost from the outset, and it felt like they'd started not even on the ground floor. It felt like they'd started in like the sub basement. The Mike Babcock hire went south basically immediately, which I feel like so many people could have predicted. Pascal Vincent takes over 4 days before training camp, and it really feels like the team struggled basically from the outset. You know, there was a lot of hope over the offseason. There was a lot of, I didn't like the Babcock hiring. I think I've been very vocal about that. I am interested to know what this team would have looked like with a full season of Babcock. I don't know that it would have been much better than what we had, based on how I've looked at kind of Pascal Vincent's coaching. And I think his methodology is probably similar to what we would have gotten from Babcock, but I think the reasoning is different, if that makes sense. And that's something I'm going to talk about kind of as we get further into the offseason. I want to do a whole thing on Pascal Vincent, his coaching techniques, what went wrong, what went right, what I liked, what I didn't, etc., etc. But the Babcock hiring starts everyone off on the wrong foot. There's allegations of a rift in the locker room between the veterans and the young guys, based on the young guys spoke up about Babcock and the veterans were like, no, that's not a thing. Again, this is all kind of allegations, so I don't know how true that is, but rumors affect the room, I think, more than a lot of people want to think. Realizing just how much the players in the front office and everything sees of social media, like they name search, they look at Twitter, they look at Instagram, like they see what you're saying, you know. Which possibly the funniest example of this is Adam Boquist, who's changing his number next season because, quote, he saw everyone talking about it on Twitter, end quote. And I think he's finally decided, okay, the number 27 might be a little bit cursed, so we're going to change that. But that's a whole other thing. So it started badly with Pascal Vincent getting the job 4 days before training camp. No one ever really found their footing. They brought Mark Recchi in to do the power play, which that super didn't help. It didn't make it worse necessarily, but I don't think it helped. I think Steve McCarthy is a guy that you need to give his marching orders this offseason. You know, there's a lot of, well, the defensive systems are poor, and that's Pascal Vincent's fault. And, like, on one hand, yes, but it's not entirely his fault. Like, he didn't hire McCarthy. McCarthy was, I believe, the other assistant under Brad Larson last year. He came up from Cleveland. So Pascal Vincent did not get to hire his assistant coaches. He just kind of acquired one of the ones that was there, and then I suspect Mark Recchi would have been brought in regardless as a power play consultant, kind of like Martin Saint-Louis was a few seasons back. But Steve McCarthy's got to go. The defense has been just miserable. Like, that's the only thing I can think of to describe it. Like, the offense, I thought, was much better for the Blue Jackets this season. They scored, I think they scored a bunch more goals than they did last season. I'm just looking up the team stats because if you're watching and you're an everydayer, take a drink. Jay did not have the tab open that he needs. This season, the Blue Jackets scored 234 goals and allowed 298. Last season, the Blue Jackets scored 213 goals and allowed 329. So, huge jump there. They scored, what was it, like 70 more goals and allowed 50 fewer, I think, give or take. Like, that's I feel good about that. So there was definitely defensive. I don't know if it was defensive improvement or goaltending improvement, probably a little bit of both. But the offense, I think, took marked steps forward, and the defense probably was a little bit better, but not as better as I wanted it to be. Looking at some fancy stats, if we just look at 5-on-5 expected goals for, the Blue Jackets finished 16th in the league with 169.2 expected goals for, and then they finished second in the league with 197.49 expected goals against. So they were expected to allow the second most goals of anyone. The only team that was expected to allow more goals was the San Jose Sharks, and I mean they sure did do that. So again, improvement, steps forward, not as big of a step as I wanted them to take. The other thing, of course, is the power play, which just again possibly even more miserable than the defense was the power play. I'm just pulling it up now. The Blue Jackets scored they scored 32 power play goals all season. They allowed 6 shorthanded goals, so it's not great. I'm not gonna lie, it's not great. I don't know where they were last season, but if I flip the stats here on, I'm using Natural Stat Trick for all of this, by the way, which is a wonderful, wonderful resource that I highly recommend that everyone uses. The Blue Jackets scored 41 power play goals and allowed 9 last season. So again, they got a little better defensively. The power play continues to just be dreadful, just god awful, and like what do you do with that? It's so frustrating. They finish, I want to say 31st in the league with 15.1%. The only team with a worse power play percentage than them was Philadelphia. Their power play percentage was so bad, it was worse than the Penguins. And the Penguins' power play was like national news level bad. So, like, that's got to change. This could probably have been the ugly segment, and I think the bad and the ugly segments are probably going to get a little bit mushed together here because when things were bad for this team, they were really, really, really bad. So defense, power play, those were the two worst criminals, I guess. That's not the word I wanted, but it'll do in that. And I want to talk about some players now. That I talked a lot about players. I didn't even. You know what? I didn't talk about in the good section. I'm sorry about this. We're gonna do a quick rewind. Erik Gudbranson might have been my surprise of the season. Hit career highs in basically everything except goals, I believe. In which he tied his career high. I'm just looking up his numbers now. He had 26 points, which his previous career high was 17. Which he set with the Calgary Flames, and again, tied his career high in points, in goals with 6, beat his career high in assists by 9, and then went from 17 to 26 in points, all things told. Was a minus 14 on a team that, again, was just so horribly bad. And I want to give a shout out to my ex-co-host Hayden, who when we did our season reviews last year, we talked a little bit about Erik Gudbranson, and he was like, I want to see 6 goals from Erik Gudbranson next year. Like, that's how many goals I want to see from him. And I ripped into him for that. I was like, buddy, that is the hottest take of all of the season reviews so far. And hey, he was right. So shout out to Hayden for that. Shout out to Erik Gudbranson for taking a step, which I didn't think was possible, but he was really, really good for the Blue Jackets this season. Let's take a quick break, and then I have a couple of players that I want to talk about that were not quite as good this season. I hate to call them disappointments, and I hate to put them in the ugly segment of the show, quote unquote, but I guess that is kind of where they're going. But I think maybe we'll just call this the bad segment, part 2. Anyway, that's coming up in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about Policygenius. Life insurance is such an important safety net for your family, but trying to find the right policy on your own can be super time-consuming and overwhelming. I know I find it so confusing and stressful, but with Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 a year for $1 million of coverage. Some of these options even include things like same-day approval. You don't have to do unnecessary medical exams, and it's so much better than trying to figure it all out by yourself. Policygenius is here for you. It's convenient, it saves time, it helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through every single step. You can easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your best and lowest price. Your work-life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and even worse, if you leave your job, if you get fired, if you get made redundant, it might not come with you. So Policygenius is the place to go if you would like a comprehensive and stress-free way to update your life insurance. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We might have time at the end of this episode for a couple of questions if people have them. I don't know if you do. I don't know if you're just kind of here to vibe, in which case, welcome in. Thank you for being an everydayer. I appreciate you making Locked On Blue Jackets your first listen of the day every single day. And we'll be with you all the way through the offseason. But the first player I want to talk about, and I feel like people know where this is coming or where this is going. Ivan Provorov was extremely poor this season, I think. He was a guy that I wasn't thrilled about the trade. I asked around. I talked to a few people. I talked to Rachel Donner over at Locked On Flyers, whose opinions on hockey I trust basically forever. And so I was like, oh, okay, maybe this will work out. The Blue Jackets have been super injured on defense. They need a little bit more offense on their defense. They need someone a little bit more durable, someone who can take the strain off of guys like Erik Gudbranson and allow him to play those third pairing minutes, which allowed him to succeed. However, it felt like an adventure every single game, and it felt like he had a much longer rope than any other younger defenseman or player. You know, there was a turnover, there was a bad penalty, someone sat the rest of the game, people got healthy scratched for poor defensive play, and it kind of felt like Provorov was just allowed to just kind of do what he wanted when he wanted. I can't count the number of times that I would watch him just give up on a play in his own zone. He was horrendous on the penalty kill. I thought he showed flashes of, and that's the annoying thing, I think, is that why I'm so annoyed about the Provorov season is that you can see flashes of what he could have been, and you can see flashes of what kind of player he was kind of in his prime, which it sounds silly to say that he's not in his prime right now because he's 26, 27. But he had 5 goals, 27 assists, 32 points over 82 games, which was an improvement on last year and the year before. It's not his career high is 41 points, which he had in his second season with Philadelphia, but it's his highest point total since 2019-20. He played fewer minutes than he's played basically any season since his rookie season. But I still think he played probably a few too many minutes. That's a whole other thing. But he was just a really frustrating player to watch because you can see flashes of what he could have been, and you just weren't getting any of that. And I think that's what was the most frustrating thing about Provorov. And again, we're going to do a bunch of, I say we, it's just me. I'm going to do a bunch of in-depth player reviews, probably not quite as many as I did last season, because I think I did one for every single player who put on a Blue Jackets jersey last season, which was, I think, 48 players. But we're going to do some more in-depth looks at the players as a whole, at the team. We'll look at, again, the offense, the defense, the goaltending, blah, blah, blah. But I think Provorov for me was maybe the biggest disappointment of the season. And someone else that I was disappointed with, and this might be something that people don't really want to hear. I wanted more from Sean Corrali than I got this season. And that's maybe unfair of me because he's a fourth line center, but he was a down season offensively. He was slightly better defensively. His faceoffs got worse. He spent a bunch of time in and out of the lineup, and like injury is not necessarily his fault, but I do think that factored into him kind of never really finding what was happening. I liked there was a fourth line for a minute there of Kuraly, Texier, and just a Danforth. And I like that a lot. I don't know if Noah's still here, the Danforth fan club, full-time member, Dina co-signing for the Danforth fan club. We're all members of the Just Danforth fan club. He was a guy that I think had a really underrated season, but I wanted more from Sean Kuraly, especially like as a leader. And he's a guy that, I was looking at the Blue Jackets cap friendly page, looking at who needs a new contract, looking at who could be on the way out, things like that. Sean Kuraly only has one more season left. So he's a UFA at the end of the 24-25 season. And I'm not sure he finishes his contract with the Blue Jackets. I don't know whether they trade him at the deadline. I don't know whether he gets traded at the draft. If the Blue Jackets are chasing the playoffs, then probably he stays. But he's a guy that I think they brought in. He was a good team guy for a minute there, kind of lifted that fourth line up, but I think there's only so much that I'm willing to give the hometown hero, which I think is, again, like Jack Roslovic was another guy who I know the fans loved him, but he was a guy that he was like the poor man's Oliver Bjorkstrand. He was streaky as hell. Was allegedly a center, but was more effective on the wing. I know that Bjorkstrand is a pure winger. Got traded. Everyone was really excited to see him in New York, and then he didn't do much of anything in New York. Like, he scored a few goals, but I think a lot of people were expecting him to go in and be a top line player like he was on Columbus. But you have to bear in mind that he was a top-line player on Columbus because they didn't have anyone else, and they didn't want to break up. So, like, he played a bunch of time on the top-line right wing spot. Who else were they going to put there? Like, Line A was out. The Marchenko was having chemistry with other players. Cole Sellinger was playing on the right wing for a minute. They moved him to center, which is fine. A perfectly great idea. I like that. Kent Johnson is a guy that plays on the wing. Like, you're going to bump Mathieu Olivier up to the top line. Like, it felt like he was playing above his station basically all the time, and only sometimes taking advantage of that. So, like, those are the guys I think that are kind of the biggest disappointments. Sounds so negative, but those were the guys that I thought didn't really take steps forward this year. That I needed them to. We're gonna get into kind of more detail for all of this, kind of as the offseason goes on. Next week, like I said, we're going to talk to Dina Weinheimer of the Calder Times, all about the Monsters, their playoff push. They finally got all of their guys back. Jack Reeves is back. I believe the only guys I haven't taken back from the Blue Jackets have been Brendan Gaunt and Carson Meyer, both of whom are injured, but they've got Trey Fix-Wolansky back. They've got Pucha back. They've got Malatesta, Del Belbaluz back. They've got Tyler Engel, just got back. They've got their goalies back. Christiansen's back. Juracek is back. Blankenberg is back. Like, the Monsters are going to be really fun to watch. I'm really excited for the Monsters playoff push or playoff race to start. But that's kind of all I've got for this live show. We'll try and do these again. I try to do them semi-regularly during the regular season, and then realize just how busy I was as a person. But we'll try and do some live shows. We'll do some happy hours where we'll do fan questions. We'll bring some guests in. Maybe we'll have a good time. But that's all I've got for today. We'll do an episode tomorrow. I want to talk a little bit more detail about Gavin Brindley's NHL debut specifically. I've got a clip from the wonderful guys over at Locked On NHL Prospect, who talked about Gavin Brindley in an episode last week. So we'll look at what they've got to say. We'll see if they are correct or incorrect. Probably correct. Those guys are usually pretty correct about prospects. But I've been Jay Foster. You can find me on Twitter at _JacobFoster, JKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue If you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, over on YouTube and on SiriusXM. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.